Chris Warnock, and I'm here today with Andy Kessler and another one of our podcasts in the Deep Astrology, Astrology as a Spiritual Portal series. I think today we're going to talk about rebirth and reincarnation, and then also, specifically how that shows up in the chart or just astrological issues. So I think you wanted to kind of start off with that, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of things to say. Just kind of, I think last time we touched on this whole idea of karmic astrology or forms of astrology that involve the idea of what we would call today, rebirth, or whatever most people would have called it, probably just reincarnation, not that long ago. And so, one of the primary systems of astrology that I'm trained in is evolutionary astrology, which I studied with Jeffrey Wolf Green and his students. And I just wanted to clarify a couple of things here. And that's really dealing with this idea of rebirth in astrology. Ideally you don't do it for novelty's sake or mere curiosity's sake. I mean, when I in my work, when I do readings for people, I think I've always asked people, do you want this? Do you want the idea of past lives and such included in the reading or not? Because it won't substantively change the reading if you don't want it. But I've never had anyone say no. So people are interested, irrespective of maybe whether they actually believe in such things. But basically, from my point of view, right, the purpose of doing this is to just identify and interpret certain symbolic signatures in the chart, because it really opens up ways for you to provide really profound descriptive context for people for a given life, and in terms of past, present, and future. And so whether someone takes that literally, and this is something that I want to get into with you this after, but I'm just saying with respect to doing natal astrology, right? And it's almost like, sometimes things can be helpful irrespective of whether they're literally true or whether one believes them to be factual. And this is kind of what I was writing to you. There's an old saying, and I've never been able to track down who originated this, and it's probably impossible, but it's from the ancient world, ancient Greece, undoubtedly. And it's about myth, and it says it goes like this, just in some ways. A myth is a story or a narrative which never happened, or about things that never happened yet are eternally true. And so the thing is, that really wasn't what I was getting at. But I see what you're saying, though. But yeah, it could. But I'm just saying it can be. You can help people by making statements, and if they need to hear it as psychological truth, that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. I won't do that, though. I mean, I'm a little more uncompromising. And if somebody tried to do that to me, I'd be like, nope. But I mean, I don't think that's that. The problem is I'm only appealing to a small number of people. So it's true. Certainly. It's like, if you're going to want to have it more accessible to people, then you're gonna need to do that a bit more. Here's what I would say about the whole concept of karma, because people will come and they'll be like, where's karma in the chart? Like it's something special. Like karma doesn't apply to everything. It's just this, certain frame of your, like, really serious stuff in your life or something, whatever. Everything's karma. A leaf doesn't fall, right? I don't pick up a pen without there being, it's all karma. So the chart itself is a complete picture of karma. And there's no question to me that the previous, what's producing the chart is coming from these eons of patterning, just as you're saying, about patterns.
Exactly.
So that's what I would say about it is, so people will come to it and they'll be like, which part of it is karma? I'm like, it's all karma. And the chart is indeed your life purpose. It's like it shows what you were manifested for.
Right. I have no problem with that. I think I agree 100%.
That I guess it's the opposite, because like I said, when I talk to people in a pop view,
right,
their view of karma is there's a lot of stuff going on in your life, right? And I think it's sort of random. And then there's also physical laws. And then there's a little small chunk of stuff that's karmic. And karmic is heavy stuff, I think, right? But you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in your day-to-day life that has nothing to do with karma in their view. And I'm like, no,
In their view.
Really what's going on is it's the unfolding of these patternings. And it's not just your personal karma. You have family karma, you have neighborhood karma, you have your city, you have your, you know, race, you have your nationality, you have your religion, you have the economy of the whole world. There's all these different levels and types of karma that are interacting.
That's true. I would
agree.
Yeah.
When you look at someone's natal chart, what you're getting there is this view, this basic, it's karma. Essentially, every single house, like I said, has been produced by past life experience, right? And also your manifestation as, you know, who you are. Now, an interesting thing about it, like Lilly in his Christian Astrology says, you know, you got to be careful because you could have a prince and a beggar's son that are born on exactly the same date and time and place, right? But he said, nevertheless, they're going to have different fortune because the prince's son, like I said, if you have a positive thing happening in the chart, he might become king, whereas the beggar's son just becomes, you know, a big man in his neighborhood. So see, these are different levels because the tendency is in modern astrology, and it fits with the modern view of things, is that I'm primary. My personal life is primary. I'm the center of the universe. So if I want to know anything, I'll look at my natal chart, and the entire universe revolves around my natal chart, and everything's in my natal chart. Bill Gates, for example, you know, second richest man in the world. He's at least in the top 10, right? If you look at his chart, second house, it's pretty good, but it's not insanely like the billionth top chart. It's like he happened to be in the right place at the right time, right? And he was right there at the beginning of that whole software thing. He jumped on it, and he's a billionaire, right? But you couldn't look at his chart and say this was a billionaire's chart if you didn't know it in the first place. You can go back afterwards.
That's true about a great many
things. Because his karma, right?
Yes.
His personal karma is just one small piece of the overlying interconnections of stuff.
Right? I agree with you 100%. What I'm
saying is that karma is the result of action. Now, the problem that you have is that, for example, in Buddhism, reincarnation is part of the whole philosophical structure of Buddhism.
That's right.
But another basis of Buddhist, you know, the philosophical religious background is that there's no self. So it's a little weird to this idea of like, I was Cleopatra and then I was, you know, all these other people. I was a donkey for a while. I spent some time as a squirrel. Then I was a peasant, you know, and now I'm me. And it's like, and I was the same, soul. There was some essential piece of me that remained unchanged. And so it's a soul. It's an eternalist kind of view of it, right?
Right.
There's this singular being that somehow stays the same over these, has different bodies, right? But stays the same. Now, the Buddhist view doesn't follow that. It says basically what you have is there are it's like a wave, right? And once that wave starts, it's going to flow, right? And it continues to flow. And there's a psychic part of the because if you think of what this is, you'd say that there's a physical, there's a spiritual, and then there's also a psychic component, right? So even when the physical ends, there's a psychic component that continues. But the view, you think about it, you're a lot different at age, you know, what I'm 57 than I was when I was born, right? There's definitely a continuity between me now and me then, right? And so we say we're the same person, but there's an incredible difference. So when you think about it, if you change bodies, right, you keep evolving. And so, you know, at what point do you stop being the same person? So that's the thing about the Buddhist is a little more subtle because there's not an eternal, unchanging, spiritual being that stays the same. It gets to the point where it changes so much that it's hard to say. Now there's a continuity. Like another example of that is if you think of a candle, that candle flame is burning and it burns for 12 hours. Is it the same flame? I mean, the physical components of it have changed. The shape has changed, right? Now there's a continuity directly from that, but it becomes very confusing as now, if I light another candle off of it, right? And take that, walk off with it, say I light not even a candle, I light a lamp from it. So same flame, right? In terms of continuity, but it's burning from a different wick. It's burning from different, oil, right? I mean,
different conditions.
Is it the same? Is it the? But is it the same flame? It's like yes and no. So you can see it's a much more subtle a view of reality.
Sure. It's sure. The whole question of of what constitutes an identity, the focus is
yes.
very,
So
very
so
different.
essentially, what the karma points to, though, is the fact, like I said, that what goes around comes around. So that any action taken, right, with the intentionality, basically, right, is going to continue to reverberate. And that's just, it's true. It's like if you act in anger, that anger goes out there. If you act in a charitable way, that goes out there, that comes back to you. And so we can just see that the consequences of actions. And that's the thing. Now the nihilist view tends to be that there's no consequences to things. Like if you can get away with things.
Okay.
If I get away with it, then there's no consequences. And that doesn't seem to be true to me. But I think there's always consequences to your willed actions.
Do we have lessons? Do we have life lessons?
Everything is a life lesson. I mean, when you look at someone's chart, that is a complete record of their past action, right? We can't know exactly what it is, but we can see the results of their past action. And it's also a complete blueprint for their manifestation in this life, right? Now, the problem with that is it's not all good, right? It's rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. It's not all going to be, oh, great, you're going to become enlightened, and you're going to be happy, and you're going to be, a better person. I mean, some are born to sweet delight, and some are born to endless night. So a little starker. It's interesting because if the Sabian symbols, there's 360 Sabian symbols. They're like each degree of the zodiac. And they were done in the 30s, I think. Someone channeled them. And it's interesting because they're modern, because every single one of them is positive. Every single one. Yep. They're all upbeat. Okay. There's nothing there's nothing freaky or negative. Now, I've got Johannes Angelus, which is 15th century, and he did the same thing. He did he's got an image for each degree, and some of them are awful. I hate to give them to clients. They're like, a death with a side, headless body, a corpse, naked old woman. She's all dried up, naked and weird, and it freaks people out. They don't want to get that stuff, and it's just, that's a different sensibility, So that's what I would say about the karmic stuff is like, I mean, a lot of people, they do have, there's some give, you can work with it, but, it's unfortunately rather stark for a lot of people, is that, a lot of people aren't going to become enlightened. A lot of people aren't going to have a great life. So
right. I think my point was more because I'm totally with you. I have that Rudyard version of the Sabian symbols. I'm gonna have to look at that at some point again. I haven't looked at that for.
I don't think there's any rotting corpses in there.
Yeah,
I don't think so. It's so like a Boy Scout swims the thing, or I mean, it's a lot of it's because it's modern, and it's something from a psychological perspective, and you don't go to the psychologist and have them bum you out. You know what I mean? They're gonna give you the opportunity to benefit from this. They want to give you the chance, right? Everybody should have a chance to benefit from it. Everyone's not gonna benefit from it, though.
That's most definitely true.
And that's what I would say about it, is that, but the perspective is, I want to help you. And the way for me to help you is to give you an opportunity to benefit from this. So I'm not going to be negative with you. I'm going to be upbeat with everybody that comes through my door, right? Because my job is to help you to see if you can have self-discovery and self-knowledge, and give you the opportunity to do that. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, but that's the psychologist's perspective.
I understand what you're saying. The therapeutic perspective.
Whereas if it's a predictive perspective, I mean, I had to do this the other day with somebody. She wanted to ask a horary, and she was, it's relationship question. So the classic relationship question is, will he contact me? And it's like, the beauty of that for the querent is that they don't have to step into the deep water there, because the contact one, if it's yes, okay, great, then we're going to have a relationship. If it's no, it's just the contact. We can still have a relationship. So I said, no, you need to ask the root question if you want an accurate answer. And the root question is, will we have a relationship? And they got it. This querent was able to get it, and she asked the question. Unfortunately for people, the answer is going to be no from, often. So, but that's, and that's not very upbeat or happy talk or anything like that. It just happens to be, that's what the result is. So it's just a different perspective in terms of what, it's not wrong. It's not better. It's just like, it depends on what your purpose is. And both of those are perfectly valid. Every time I'm looking at someone's chart, I mean, I had another one I did yesterday. It was very interesting, complete relationship reading. And a complete relationship reading, what I do is the person asks a horary about the relationship, and then I can look at the natal charts. So the question came back, and it was kind of like, it was just sort of like what I call ships passing in the night horary. It's sort of like, it wasn't super negative, but there wasn't a lot of connection in the chart. You know what I mean? And the quested, the person they're asking about, was strong in the 7th house. And Lily says if the 7th ruler is strong in the 7th house in a marriage question or a relationship question, the person's not interested in marriage or not interested in a long-term relationship. So you got someone who was strongly dignified, stubborn in the 7th house, and then no aspects with the querent, right? So it's not terrible, but it's not like, that's not a really great, that's sort of drifting. If you got a relationship, to me, that was sort of a drifting chart, right? If you don't even have a relationship, I don't know. So then I look at the natal charts, the person they're asking about, now the person, the guy who was asking, who was interested in this stuff, his 7th house was like very Saturnine. So his complement, the person who's complementary to him, one of his types, not his only type, it was a Saturn type person. You know what I mean? A serious person, like a Capricorn, Saturn Capricorn kind of person. Serious, conventional, maybe older, wise, could be street smart, could be a little deceitful, but pretty good. I mean, so that's kind of his complement. And that's not the only people he ended up with, but that's sort of his complement. Whereas the person he was asking about, her chart, every single planet in her chart was in a fire sign. Every single, she had Leo, she had Aries and Sagittarius, every single planet. Now, somebody like that, incredibly dynamic. I bet she's an exciting person. I bet she's really charismatic, right? But, I was also indicating like multiple relationships. Like it was like, shoot, like, like 8, you know what I mean? It could be like at least 4 and maybe 8. But she's just like, that's somebody who you need to be like Bill Gates and rich and dynamic and confident to deal with her. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like that much fire, every single planet in fire, right? Sun Leo, I forget, Sun Leo, Mercury Leo, Venus Leo, Saturn and Sagittarius, Jupiter and Mars and Aries. I mean, the person would be out of control. You can just imagine what they would be like. And I'm sure, and again, I think he was Sun Sagittarius. I mean, I could see there was a connection, right? They had that in common, but he had a lot more to his chart. And that person's very one-dimensional in a way. I mean, if you don't have any air, any water, any earth in your chart, you just lack the natural balance, right? Of having your psyche that way. So okay, what I could see with that chart was, I'm like, I could see that you were probably interested in her because I bet she's really exciting person, passionate, exciting, charismatic, dynamic person, but it's not somebody who's going to be sticking around in a relationship probably. And there'd be power struggles like crazy. I mean, she's Sun Leo. I mean, it's like not somebody who's going to be dominating, and it was like, so that was interesting. I'm like, you could see why he would be attracted to her on one hand, but you could also see why it was not probably going to be that way. Now, I haven't gotten any feedback from it, but I'm saying that was very interesting to look at the horary and then look at the natal charts. And you're looking at it, basically these patterns from different perspectives. You're able to see the horary gives you a very focused, predictive perspective. And then the natal charts, I'm doing a much more, I wouldn't say it's traditional because they didn't do psychological astrology as much, but I'm pulling a lot of stuff into it. It's not all happy talk.
Sure.
Right. Because if I was doing happy talk, I'd be like, ooh, look how you, and the standard modern way of doing things is look at the chart first, and then you've got about 50 possible things that you could look at. You don't have a methodology exactly, but what you do is you're governed by the chart. And like I said, I discovered this as electional. So the way you do a modern election is you just start looking at charts, right? And the stuff will pop out at you, very different things in different charts. And you have maybe 50 things that could pop out at you. And you'll be like, oh, look, there's this and this and this. And that's how you do it. And that's, I think, the natal with a synergy too. I think it's that way too. I think there's not much technique there. It's just stuff popping out. Now, I'm guilty of that to a certain extent because the way I just did that was way more intuitive than say I would be doing a horary reading,
right,
or that. But nevertheless, there's a lot more technique in it because I'm using traditional stuff added into it. So what I would say about these people is they have a karmic connection because everyone you have any connection to has a karmic connection to, right?
sure.
It's not just your soulmate that you have a karmic connection to. The guy at the store that you buy stuff from, you have a karmic. It's not maybe as strong, right? But everybody you interact with, there's a karmic connection there. And so it's not always good either.
Of course.
And that's that. And right. But I'm saying, I'm just getting the pop view of it is there's this tendency to be like, and then the whole soulmate thing. I mean, that's another kind of problematic modern view, that there's only one person for you and they're out there. And once you find them, your life will be, you'll be in heaven, and, that's probably not true. I haven't really, there's probably a number of people you could more or less get along with depending on who you are. But you're going to have to work at it with everybody.
Right.
No, and that's what I would say about the soulmate stuff. But it's, so that's what I would say about it is that if we're looking, the underpinning of the chart, to me, it is karmic. Now, here's the thing is like, so what about free will? It's like, well, free will
wait.
is.
Let's not get into that yet, because that's. Should we get into that right now? or maybe.
I don't know.
Let you go.
My view is that free will is much more of a potentiality, right? And that it's really the divine part of us that has free will. It's like, insofar as we are following our passions, our emotions, our desires, right? Our conditioning, right? None of that is free will. So there's not a whole big ambit for it. If you had a situation where, like, for example, you got really angry and you're able to pull yourself back from the brink, and not freak out this time, well, maybe that would be free will, but maybe that's just another piece of karma. You know what I mean? It's a little hard the ego would like to believe in free will. The ego would like to be able to do whatever it wants, because that's kind of central to its view of itself, is that it wants to be, that's the whole thing with karma and fate. People hate it because it's like, it's stopping me from getting what I want, is the sort of view of it. Right, and as opposed to recognizing that sometimes it's like a little kid who wants to get into the cupboard and eat 50 cookies. If you got what you wanted, you might not be so. It's funny to me. I was laughing about this. I get obsessed with certain, like, for me, like con men or whatever. And when people get money, and they seem to do the same thing, it's like, okay, you buy expensive cars, right? You buy expensive house, you buy expensive clothes, you go on expensive vacations, you eat expensive food, and you go to a nightclub and do lots of cocaine and have lots of prostitutes. And it's like, and that's it. And it's like, if get your hands on the money, and that's what you're going to do with it. And it's like, everybody does that. Like, you billionaire, if you scam people, with a hedge fund or something or whatever, it just seems to be the same. Yeah, whatever. The same dull thing is that everybody wants that stuff. And it's like, I once read a book about these guys. I think they were into art forgery. So they had really fine food and stuff. They were into that. So they had really, it wasn't sort of the cocaine at the nightclub stuff, but nevertheless, it just seems to me to be like, we're probably protected to a good deal by not being rich. Because then if you were, a lot of people would go out and be blown into this crazy stuff.
Right.
But, so.
Well, here, let me interrupt here for a second. A few minutes ago, when you were discussing doing the horary for that guy, or was it, who was the client?
Yeah, it was
the guy, and then looking at the natal charts. That was really great, and that, to me, that's a really great example of why it's great to study things like traditional astrology, and why I became a student of yours, for sure. But just to take it back for a minute, so a few minutes before that, I asked you, being an extremely self-reflective person, you know, if you had to identify several themes in your life that were absolutely extremely significant, what they would be. And I gave you the first two, right? And you came up with the third one. So, so that was kind of my point, right? That basically, really significant themes and patterns and things that we are compulsively drawn to that end up being very determinative in our life, right? These are things that in my work, in my astrological work through evolutionary astrology, you can see these things very, very clearly, like always. And it's like, it's just a great system to have. And it's like those primary dynamics are just often very much in aligned with what I would identify as typically as a person's kind of life path, whether you want to call it evolutionary path, life lessons, their trajectory, what they need to do. Now, with respect to free will, I mean, I think I'm very much in alignment with you on this too, where, you know, getting into astrology and becoming an astrologer has definitely deepened my conviction in the fact that a lot of stuff is out of our hands and that a lot of stuff has been conditioned in extreme ways.
Though.
Yes.
We don't have the wisdom to determine. I mean,
right.
it's like the weather. I'm like, right. I'm glad I'm not in charge of the weather because I would screw it up. You know,
right. Right.
But I guess what I would say is that I have to be a little more, you know, I think that if you're the kind of person that's interested in, you know, being a better person spiritually, right? Then, you know, there's plenty to work with in terms of astrology, but that's only true of a very small percentage of people.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
You know, there's not a lot of people that they're really, I mean, there's not a lot of people, but there's a bigger percentage of people that don't want to feel guilty. So that's why they drive a Prius. Right. It's like that way. I mean, I'm driving a Prius, you know, I can be the whole 21st century rich American, you know, and part of this exploitative system, but I'm not so bad, you know? And so the spiritual stuff, like, for example, the people that I ran across, a lot of people interested in Zen, right? They wanted to go to church, but they didn't like Christianity. So they wanted Sunday school, they wanted a food bank, they wanted social welfare stuff, but they didn't really like Christianity. So, but they wanted something else that would do that, right? So they could be part of the community and they could feel good about themselves. They don't have to feel guilty about it, but they can just continue with your same old life, right? And just not feel bad about yourself. So there's a level of that too, you know, but the people that are like, no, I'm really serious about it. And I'm willing, I mean, to me, what was interesting about astrology and magic is that it had a really revolutionary effect on the rest of my life. And once I saw that it worked, then that was just, you know, I had to keep moving on, like I said, the whole idea of worldview and what the consequences are and anything like that. I think a lot of people compartmentalize. I remember meeting this guy in Washington, D.C., and he's like, well, you know, I'm a programmer by day and I'm a goetic magician by night. You know, it's like, and he had these in two totally separate compartments and they don't affect each other, you know? And I think that's often true, is that people will have one weird thing in their life that doesn't affect everything else. And so that's never been like I said, that's why I'm so obsessed with worldview, you know, and, you know, and looking at you know, what does this mean? I mean, if, like I said, if this stuff works, if I can look at your chart and accurately tell your personality, that should not be so, right? You know, it should be randomly determined. It should be from your upbringing. It should be from genetic factors. I should not be able to look at your chart and be able to say so accurately, you know, what, like, for example, I had a guy today email me who had a lot of air. I think he had no planets in water. And I said, you know, you need to work on emotional understanding both of yourself and others. And he said to me, he said, this is really hard for me. And I'm like, well, of course it is. You're like Sun Libra, Moon Libra. I forget what it was. It was like Sun and Moon and Mercury in Libra, you know? And that's not somebody who's going to have, this could be somebody who's brilliant, right? Very objective, very like a Mr. Spock kind of person, you know, as a stereotype. But why the frick should that have to do from their date of birth, right? That's all random shit. I mean, the planets aren't really there right? Because they're in some other, you go out in space and they're in the constellations are an illusion and all this sort of stuff. Why is this even true? But if it's true, that has it's not just like, oh, that's interesting and I'll go along and do my other stuff. And that's what I think most people do. Either they discount it, they take, Americans are very good at compartmentalizing, being in what they call pragmatic, right? I'll just use it, but I won't think about the implications of it, and I'll use it unless it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, it's obviously bullshit. I mean, we have that as astrologers, we have that as a problem, because if it's not 100% accurate, then the whole thing is garbage and it's all a fraud, and that's kind of a little nerve-wracking at times. So that's what I would say about it, is that I think that yes, the chart is a chart of your karma and fate, but it ain't good in a lot of cases. Even if nobody's going to have all good stuff going on, everyone's going to have major problems.
Well, the good may be that someone wants to know, and they want to know what they might be able to do about it, or about certain problems, certain things. That could be the good.
I mean, yeah. I kind of despair of really necessarily becoming enlightened. And I mean, it's probably I'm going to have a couple another lifetimes, and it's just like, because I have such a heavy karmic thing, and it doesn't mean I'm not trying, but I'm at 57 and I said, I still have all these problems. So it's like, I certainly don't think that we're going to reach a point where everyone's going to be enlightened and we're going to have and the whole society is going to then become evolved or something like that. It's like, no, I don't think so. I mean, even on an individual level, it's just a little bit. On the other hand, you want to flip that, everybody is consciousness. I mean, there's no need to do anything right now. Everything's perfect the way it is. All this frantic evolving and trying to change and spiritual growth and all that is really getting off base, because nothing needs to be changed from now. You're like, what are you talking about? This sucks. It's like, well, you just got to change your perspective. And how do you do that? It's like falling asleep. How do you fall asleep? I'm going to make myself fall asleep. That isn't very effective. You try really hard to fall asleep, you're not going to fall asleep, And so that's the thing about waking up, is that it's right here. Enlightenment's in the palm of your hand at every moment. I mean, you are awake because you're conscious. I mean, there's no doubt that we're conscious. And so, but the thing what immediately jumps to is that, oh, I'm conscious and I'm Chris. And, then it's lost. That moment of primal clarity there is immediately and that's at every moment. I mean, the self is like, if you think of a cartoon, those are just still pictures, right? Being transmitted at, whatever it is, 60 frames a second or whatever it is. And because one frame follows the other, it has the illusion of movement. The self is the same way. The self is being recreated at every instant, right? From this karma, from these patternings, right?
Right.
So combined, and the consciousness is captured by those patternings and sees itself as having an I, seeing itself as an ego. And that just continues until it doesn't.